Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with mysticgenmara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight is my ongoing series called Myth and Tarot, and we are going to be discussing the Sprites and or the Pixies. There's not a lot of difference here, but they are the smaller end of the fairy or the fae. So I just decided to put them together. And at the end of this stream, we'll do a little tarot reading for the Sprites and Pixies to see where they're at in their life. So, all for fun, of course. The Sprites or Pixies... if you're enjoying this type of content, please hit the subscribe button, drop a like on the video. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, you can drop it in the comments or in the live chat. As long as we're respectful, that's the one thing I ask for. So, other than that, we'll move on. The clan of the fairy that's most commonly associated with the fairy is the Sprites and the Pixies. That's what most of us know them by, the little Tinkerbell type Pixies and fairies, you know, things like that. You'll see there's a lot of artists out there that have the little fairies with the wings, and that's what we assume are fairies, and they are. But they're a clan within the fairy. So originally this term was used to describe just an in general spirit. In Latin it was spiritus, or in French it was esprit. But over the years languages have adjusted it to just, now it's sprite instead of spirit. But Sprites and Pixies have minor differences, and we're going to go over those right now. Understand that a lot of the energy surrounding them is very similar. So, we'll start with Sprites. Sprites can be natural elementals or spirits of the dead who haven't passed over, kind of like a shade, only not hostile. And usually with a lot more of their features. Shades don't always have a lot of human features. A Sprite will. Sprites tend to be associated with multiple elements. Their primary element is water or air. Some say that air sprites are the sylphs, the guardians of the realm of air and the elemental energy of air. I personally don't agree with that particular version, but if that works for you, then go for it. Because I've worked with the sylphs for quite a while, and they don't give me sprite energy. The sylphs can be fairly massive, really. Sprites are not. I think that there are air sprites, don't get me wrong. But the sylphs, like I said, appear larger when you're working with them in meditation, third eye imaging type stuff, and they don't really have a lot of interference with humans. We have to seek them out. And they hold all of the energy of air: intelligence, logic, reason, balance of life, and then the opposites of that as well. So they can be interesting to work with sometimes. But that's my opinion on that subject. So it's kind of how you feel with it, how you feel that energy works. And I've had a really weird day today, so if I am a little mouthy, I do apologize. In several myths, the Sprites are said to live near water. They like the calm and cool water. They also will hang out with nymphs. So Sprites hanging out with nymphs. Interesting combination of creatures. On the edge of the forest at these locations, because the nymphs tend to be out in the woods, whereas the Sprites tend to be along the banks or in the water itself. The one thing with Sprites, and I've only worked with them once or twice, just because the type of energy they have is not something that I normally look for when I'm heading to the Fae, because the fairy realm is very broad and very sectioned. So when I'm working with the fairy, I don't tend to work with Sprites. It's nothing bad, just not something I usually do. But this is one thing that you do have to be aware of if you choose to work with the little creatures. They're very hot-headed. They have exceptionally short tempers and kind of like their height, but hopefully they don't smite me for saying that. But in reality, they have short tempers because they have no patience for disrespect, and they tend to be in a hurry most of the time. And if they get to feeling impatient, their temper just flares up. It's just a part of who they are. They've been known to strike offending persons with madness. Sometimes it's temporary, full madness for a couple of weeks. There are stories, though, when a sprite decides to turn against you and they smite you. It's a permanent madness. They literally will split parts of your brain so that you cannot recover. They can be a little hostile. So most of the fairy is good and bad. They're not all of them are one group, one or the other. There are, like I said before, they do come in courts, the Seelie and the Unseelie, and the sprites tend towards the Seelie, the throne of light, but that doesn't always mean they're the good guys, just as a heads up. And with the height comment that I made before, they are not tall. A sprite can be, and this is a difference from pixies, sprites can be 8 to 12 inches tall. The really powerful amongst them tend to be a little bit taller. It's not always the case, but that's how it trends. And they have very delicate wings that allow them to flit from flower to flower or appear to skip like a rock across the water. They're exceptionally graceful. They're very thin and extremely good looking for what they are. Sprites and pixies both... Sorry, I need a drink. Sprites and pixies both tend to be exceptionally artistic, and they can help you with your artistic endeavors if they feel like you're worth working with in their mind. They have a little bit of an attitude sometimes, so if they are pretty much like, we're not talking, it's not you, it's truthfully them. They are also very agile and extremely intelligent creatures. They can help with learning things that need grace, dancing, gymnastics. They tend towards the things that are focusing on grace and traditional. They will help with dance styles like ballet, ballroom. A lot of the newer stuff they're watching, they're not quite sure, from what I can find, the people who work with them a lot, they're not really sure about the modern dancing. They find it a little too jarring for them. They like the grace, they like the movement, the flow of ballet, ballroom, etc. It could be that whole water-air thing. They don't want to be jarred, they want to go with the flow. One of the first sightings of a sprite in modern history that was recorded, I'll emphasize that, is around 1300 AD. Their myths go back a long time, but a lot of it was oral history, not always written down. This sprite was seen as a female with very long golden hair. It was believed at this time that the sprite's hair and clothing color would change with the seasons. Some pixies have similar myth around them. It's an interesting theory. I have not, as I said, interacted enough with sprites to keep up with the hair and clothing thing. But if you've had experiences with the pixies or the fairy sprites, have you noticed that their clothing shifts and their hair color shifts with the seasons? Because that would be something interesting to hear about if you are willing to share. Unlike the sylphs, sprites tend to enjoy interaction with humans. Doesn't always mean that it's for our benefit, but they do enjoy interacting once in a while. These pesky little creatures like to cause humans to fall in love with the sprite, and they don't have any qualms about size. So they're only like 8 to 12 inches tall. They don't care if you're 300 pounds and 6'10". They just have this little impish nature once in a while to be like, oh, here we go, let's play some Cupid. This action inspired many a poet and bard to write songs and poems about the dangers of these little guys. Because they'll do things like this and then break the person's heart just because they can. Imps. Anyway, but they're not imps, they're sprites. One of the more famous references to a sprite in this manner is actually written by Shakespeare in his, I believe it's play, The Tempest. And I linked some of Shakespeare's stuff in the description if you're interested. Sprites actually have followed through pop culture, and they show up in some modern movies. such as the movie Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry. If you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth it. It's super cheesy. It's an 80s movie, but I don't know. It's one of those ones where you watch it when you're a kid and you grow up and you watch it again, you're still like, oh, such a good movie, even though the special effects were completely different. Like, a lot of it was physical makeup and things like that. The big horns that the devil wears are part of that special effects from back in the day. It's definitely a memory style movie, not something that you would just pick up one day and enjoy. It's something you've seen before and want to watch again. That's how I view it, and I personally love it. So but that's kind of all I could find with sprites, even from my own working with them. They're just kind of there. Excuse me. So we'll move on with the Pixies. As I said, I'm kind of doing these together because as a clan, they're not truthfully separate with the Fae. They're just within their own little clan. They've got like two different groups. From what I understand, the Pixies, and could be the reason that they're all in one group, they do have exceptionally long lives. 500 to 1,000 years average is what I was reading. The Pixies are kind of the younger versions, the immature version of a Sprite. So, however you choose to see them, they are very similar. It's kind of why I'm doing them in this order. The term Pixie, oddly enough, was first referenced in literature around the year 1630 AD, so about 300 years after sprites were written about. It is thought that the name we know today, spelled Pixie, P-I-X-I-E, was actually inspired by a Swedish word Piski, P-Y-S-K-E. The Swedish term means small fairy, so there's some correlation there, but I dug around for a while trying to figure out what the source of the word was, and modern day the term Pixie is a loose connection to the Swedish word. It does not actually mean the same thing going back. So who knows where the term Pixie actually came from, other than it was written sometime around 1630 AD. Could have been a misspelling for all I know. Some of the Celtic and British myths around pixies have them leading hikers and hunters astray in the woods. Like, seriously. The woods are dangerous enough on their own not to worry about the fairy realm trying to get you to, you know? One of the terms for being lost in the woods, especially if you're someone who just kind of, and I fall prey to this, but I don't think it's from pixies. You just get that urge to wander off the trail because you saw something shiny and away you go. That's my life. But the term is usually the pixie led, because the pixies kind of caught your attention and dragging you away from the trail. It doesn't always mean good or bad, but once you get off the trail for very far, suddenly you're lost, the pixie disappears and sitting behind a leaf giggling at you. So, you know how they claim to be, how to fix being pixie-led? And this was the one that I'm like, are you serious? This is what you do? If you ever get in the situation where you've been pixie-led, you're lost out in the woods, the old legends state if you take your coat off, turn it inside out, and put it back on, it breaks the spell of the pixie and allows you to find your way back to the trail. I will not validate that one way or another, but that's what they said would break a pixie spell, because it wasn't super strong, but it was enough that if you did that, you could break it. Who knows? Anyway, another fun term that I found was the term pixie-lated. Has nothing to do with bad digital pictures like pixelated. It actually means that to touch a pixie without their basically being willingness to for you to touch them, or for them to be frustrated with you and to touch you, it's a slight madness or insane period, but only for a short time. Generally, you're out in the woods, you come back, you're a little woohoo, and that's when they would call you pixie-lated. I'm like, that is awesome. Sorry, but I found that highly amusing. Way less insane than being touched or smote by a sprite. That one's intense. This one is more just kind of like a you're disoriented for a while. And that's why a lot of people think that the Pixie is just the younger version of the Sprite. They haven't fully matured into their power yet. And that's why I personally think they're all in the same clan, which is why I'm doing them together today. Pixies do appear very similar to Sprites, except that Pixies are generally smaller, as in 4 to 6 inches in height. So when you think Tinkerbell from the old Peter Pan, yeah, I had to think which movie I was talking about. That's about a Pixie size. The Sprites tend to be a little bit bigger. Pixie's hair and dress follow the seasons with color and style, same as the Sprites, another correlation. They have pointed ears, and they like to wear pointed hats. And the hats are not always made out of cloth. Let me see. For example, the Leaf Pixie. They have a little pointed hat. Right on, where are we at here? Over here. There's a little pointed hat there. And that's kind of what a Pixie looks like. They have little butterfly, dragonfly type wings. And when you think of the pointed hat, if you're not really sure if the picture wasn't quite clear enough, think of a pointed witch's hat without the brim. That's just the cone. They have the same style, delicate butterfly style, wings as their slightly larger brethren, the Sprites. And on that topic, because I ran into a couple of different places on the internet where people were arguing about these over the last few years, saying that Sprites and Pixies were only female, that there's no such thing as a male one. Almost every clan of the fairy, and I'm just going to state this now, and it may come up again later, that's fine. Almost every clan in the fairy has both male and female. It's very, very rare to have an exceptionally exclusively one-gendered clan, because they're a lot like humans in the respect of you have to procreate, Most of the clans are very open about sexuality and nudity. They don't tend to wear clothes. That's more of a human thing in their mind. So if you happen to see a cluster of them, like when I talked about leprechauns, everyone assumed they were always men. Well, most of them are, but there are female leprechauns. They're just as ugly as the men, so it's really hard to tell them apart. If you ever play much D&D or look much into the realms of the dwarfs or the myths of the dwarfs, same concept. They're just as ugly as the men and have beards, so it's really hard to tell them apart. That's the case for most of the fairy. And there are male Sprites and there are male Pixies. One artist's description is like this one here, little warrior dude. But they do actually exist in both genders, just just how it is, even though most of your artists' rendering show them in the feminine, because they tend to be delicate and you assume delicate equals feminine, and that's fine. But as I was going over this, it was kind of shocking to see the arguments going on where I'm like, yes, go out in the woods, sit next to a stream, drop into meditation, and ask them. Because I have, and that's what they've shown me. So, just a side note, little rant there for a second. Pixies are known for amazing dancing, just like the Sprites, and they tend towards great beauty as well. So to see one, their beauty could shock you, just because it's so perfect. But they're, this tall. Both Pixies and Sprites are drawn to you if you have a garden, and they like flowers. So even if you have like a veggie garden, stuff a bunch of flowers in and mix everything. Marigolds, Elysium, things like that. Just to kind of catch their attention if you want to have them around. They're interesting to have around if you go that direction. Bonus points. If you really want Sprites around, have a bird bath or a water feature. They love water. So even just like one of those little battery powered waterfalls out in your outside garden, they will be drawn to that as well. The little koi pond, something like that, is another good way to get their attention. What you can gain from working with these guys, I'm not just telling you, hey, call them in, and then don't actually, try to build a relationship or anything. You can gain the ability, they have the ability to grant wishes. but word your wishes carefully. If they're feeling mischievous, your wish could be exactly in word what you requested, but in reality, very wrong. Not as dangerous as the djinn, which we'll discuss those monsters later, but it's not pleasant. They also can grant wealth if you work with them, and from what I was reading, it's not just material wealth, the dollar signs. It can also be wealth of friends, wealth of prosperity on your land, things like that. Kindness and intelligence come from pixies and sprites, even though they can be a little can at times have a little bit of an attitude about them. They do tend towards kindness. They will help work with intelligence, leading people to believe they are tied to the air element, which, like I said, I'm not saying that they're not tied to air. What I'm saying is I don't think they're sylphs. They like to play pranks, but they tend to be a little bit more helpful and nice when you're kind of on the same page with them, but you have to kind of work with them to kind of figure out where that stands. So, what is going on? Not sure what this is. May have to delete somebody here in a minute. Just 1 second. I don't have a problem with commenting, but when you start spamming the chat, that's when I have an issue. Well, we'll see how this goes for a second before I do anything. Now, to attract pixies and sprites, if you want them around, as I stated earlier, having plants outside, lots of flowers preferred, water features are, huge bonus points. For pixies specifically, you can build a small stone home or cave. There's a lot of images you see in a lot of Japanese flower gardens, the little stone houses. Can't remember what they're called. Something to look into. They generally don't need to be more than 12 inches tall for pixies. Little doors, windows, things like that, a little fairy garden type stuff. To really draw them in, they like little bits of ribbon, like 2 to 3 inch pieces of shiny ribbon, silk, polished or faceted gems, to add some of those to the house, decorate it up, things like that. Pixies like finer things that the humans have, so they like shiny stuff. Sprites can be brought in with such things as well, but it's not as common for sprites. As they've matured, they kind of have stepped away from a lot of that. The other one that I thought was interesting, sorry I got distracted, is pixies in particular. Not so much sprites, but pixies like to be around horses. And I thought that was interesting. They can be found around barns, fields where horses are. They just like to be near them. It was thought back in the day that the tight little ringlet mess that occurs in the manes of horses, the ones that you almost can't brush out, and I've tried, and the ones that's in their manes and their tails, tended to be from pixies. Why they thought that, I'm not exactly sure, but it was thought that the pixies would kind of like twirl their fingers in and hold on while the horse went around the field, or they would try to braid it, not really know what they were doing, and make a gigantic mess out of things. So it could be interesting what they would do to horse tails, but they never hurt the animal. It was just more of a frustration for the human that had to try to untangle that. But odd little tidbit, just something to think about. So, with that, okay, making sure I'm not missing any of my notes here. we will go ahead. Oh, oops, forgot something. Just a second. We will go ahead and do the tarot reading for the Sprites and Pixies. I just missed. Oh, what am I? Sorry, I have notes in like 2 different files. So, now that we've got that figured out, I am using the Tarot Art Nouveau, which is kind of my standard deck for these Myth and Tarot readings, and it's just going to be the basic Celtic cross spread. And so what I do is, and this is more for fun, is we've discussed the Sprites and the Pixies, and now I will do a general tarot reading for them. I mean, it can also be for you as well. If something catches your attention, gives you those little chills up the spine, that usually means the messages can be given to you as well. Yeah, and like I said, this is just more for fun. Basically, if I was sitting down next to the king and queen of the Pixies and the Sprites, this is the kind of reading that they would get. So, and I read intuitively, so the messages that come through will probably sometimes what the meaning of the card is, sometimes not. It just depends on the day and what the message is. So, and it's a 10-card spread, and I draw my cards live so that I don't, there's no, oh, you planned this out. Nope, I draw them right here. The way I shuffle and draw, it's not quite like other people do. I was watching one tarot reader on YouTube the other day, and I will say he's good, but holy cow, I'm surprised his decks don't catch on fire the way he shuffles. It's intense. But everyone has their own way of doing that. So, to start with, we will go to the where they are at the moment, which is the 3 of Swords. So it's the 3 of air, the 3 of truth. It's almost like you have the juvenile talking to the grown-up, kind of like looking for help, looking for advice and guidance. The message that's coming up is the Pixies specifically are looking to the Sprites for knowledge, for guidance, for awareness. There's some seeking of truth, but they also are looking at the divinity through the triad: maiden, mother, crone, child, warrior, father, elder, of the man. But they're looking at these for guidance, for help. The Pixies really are lost right now, is what I'm getting from this. And when you look at the young lady sitting down, she's looking kind of lost. She's looking for guidance. Unfortunately, the Sprites, the one standing up, is kind of like, you'll have to figure it out. I don't have a lot of help for you. So there's a little bit of frustration there is what's coming up for them in the moment. The thing that is crossing them, their main obstacle, is the 3 of Pentacles, the 3 of Earth, which is the opposite of the Swords and air. So basically they're kind of being struggled by being too grounded, grounded to the point of almost being forgotten. And when you look at how she's sitting, she's feeling like she's been left behind, like she's been left out. Her heart's broken, her flowers are falling down, there's a bird at her feet trying to eat them. It's just kind of a morose feeling that's coming through, so they're kind of feeling lost. Like, in amongst themselves, they're having a little bit of an argument, trying to find out where they're at in life. But what's crossing both of them, the clan as a whole, is they're being forgotten for what they really are, which is an exceptionally powerful branch of the fairy, but we all see them as like cartoonish almost, and that's frustrating them. So their higher self is the Knave of Pentacles. So we're still with the earth energy. So knowledge and wisdom is what's going to guide them, what is helping them through this. And it's a matter of, are you going to listen? Like, their higher energy is kind of being arrogant, like, listen, you guys are not paying attention, I can help you, this is where we're going, It's whether or not they're going to listen, not going to pick up on that little note that's being called from their higher self. But it's really talking about looking inside for wisdom, and they're looking outwards. They're wanting to ask, the triple goddess, the triple god for the guidance, and their higher self is like, you can ask them, but they're going to tell you the same thing. You already know what's there, you're just not looking at it. So let's look at their subconscious. It's the 5 of chalices. So their subconscious mind, their lower self basically, is really looking at the fact that they've got there's part of their life that's broken, but they're not paying attention to the rest of it that's still in one piece. No, they're focusing 100% on the broken part of their life, their emotional breakup, so to speak, with humanity. Well, that's an interesting one. They're kind of frustrated with the fact that they don't have their connection to us like they used to have, and they're blaming it on the separation from us from nature. Like, they want us to go back to stepping into nature, going outside, being around plants, taking our shoes off, touching grass, things like that. They're frustrated by that, but they're not looking at the fact that there's a whole bunch of people who are still doing that. They're looking at the ones that have completely cut off, and so they're seeing that loss, but it's like, you're missing the bigger picture here, kids. You're only looking at a small portion. The rest of us are still trying to be out there. Their immediate past is the 8 of chalices, so they've went through some sadness, and we'll go with like the last 50 years, because we're talking about creatures who live for 1,000, so 50 is a good past history. They're looking at this like eternal struggle. They're constantly feeling like ups and downs and ups and downs. Their past was in a down period. They're on an upswing now because really Pixies and Sprites and the Fairy as a whole is starting to become more popular again. So their past is really kind of morose. They're sad about it. Not a lot good. Not a lot of positivity there. And that's what's led them to where they're at in the moment, where they're not really sure where they stand. And this whole feeling like they've been forgotten or been lost is what's coming up for them. Their higher self is like, dude, stop. You're fine. Step out. Make the connection again. They're still there, but their subconscious mind is still stuck looking at that broken part of their life instead of looking ahead at what's coming. And what is coming? We have the 10 of Swords. It's a little bit of brutal truth coming forward, but it's also the end of a cycle. Like, their previous cycle is done and it's time to move on. But to move on is to, like I said, deal with some of those brutal truths. And they're not quite ready for that yet. They want to enjoy their playing. They want to enjoy their fun. But the reality of the situation is the 10 of Swords is saying you have to cut away the stuff that's not working for you anymore, and we have to move forward. Part of what's not working is their obsessive focus on the part of their life that's been broken, the part that they feel they've been forgotten from. They have a lot more going for them, and the 10 of Swords is like, okay, time to clear out the nonsense. We're moving on. So we are now to their attitude, kind of like their attitude about life. So this is a little bit of their internal, but it's also an external. So you've got their attitude and how people are perceiving their attitude. And that is the 3, the Empress of the major arcana. So they've got a very strong feminine nature coming forward, and it could be part of their nature being a little bit more, really picture, I just lost her name. The Taming of the Shrew. They're kind of being shrewish, like, I don't want to. And the outside world's perceiving them as being a little bit more petulant, even though that is not who they are, but that's how they're being perceived. And so they've got a little bit of they need a little PR firm working for them to help fix how they're being seen in the world at the moment, because they've been stuck for so long. They have to deal with some hard truths to be able to move forward, and that's making them come across as being a little bit petulant, a little bit frustrated, but they have a big feminine energy coming in to help guide them, again, if they choose to listen to it. So their environment, where they're at in the moment, they have number 7, the Chariot of the major arcana. So things are moving for them. They're moving quickly. And with the divine feminine, it's really about pick up your feet. We've got things to do. Quit with the attitude. Your environment is picking up. Your environment's getting busy. Are you going to keep looking at the past? Are you still going to be frustrated about being forgotten? Or are you going to step up? Are you going to put yourself back out there? Are you going to try to reconnect with the humans who want to? The rest don't want to? Fine, that's on them. But things are moving faster than they're probably ready for. Again, you're looking at creatures who live for 1,000 years or more. And so for them, when it starts to move quickly, as in like 1 or 2 years, that's a lot. And so they're having a little bit of a struggle there, but their local environment is saying, dude, we got to go. There's things happening. So let's look at their hopes and fears. It's number 21. I am horrible with Roman numerals. It's the World card. So the outcome for their hopes right now are to be reconnected to the realm of humans. They want to be reconnected and reawakened within the human awareness. They also want to try to take their place more within the Fae. There's this feeling that I'm getting that's saying that they feel like they've been forgotten and kicked out of the fairy realm as well. They haven't been. But the infighting that tends to pop up within the different clans inside the Sith and the Shis, the fairy mounds, is kind of driven them out. So the Sprites and the Pixies are kind of loners in that respect. The clan tends to stay away from the fairy mounds. And they feel like because of that they've been ostracized or kicked out. But the reality is they're still part of the Fae, and the Fae is willing to have them come back. Send your representatives to the court, however you want to see that. You're not alone, is what the big part that is coming forward. And they feel like they might be, but then there's this other part that says that they're not. So, you know, how that works for them. Let me check one thing real quick. Okay. And their outcome. So this is the overall, how this all ties up for them. We have the number 6, the Lovers. So the overall outcome is they're still seeking that connection, and if they're willing to step out and reach for it, the connection's there, and it's going to be pretty intense. It's going to be beneficial for both parties. So if you have Pixies or Sprites starting to show up, little, you know, things you're catching at the corner of your eye, just say hello, because they're reaching out. And this is kind of like the overall vibe I'm getting from this reading is they need to unstick themselves. They've put themselves somewhere, they've separated themselves, and now it's time to adapt, to grow, to change. Well, just for us in everyday world, it takes us months to change habits and patterns, if not years. When you put spread that out over 1,000 years, we're talking decades for them to break their cycles. Not always, but that tends to be what happens. So the overall outcome is actually pretty positive for them. It's really about breaking those old patterns, reaffirming new patterns, reconnecting with humans that are willing to listen. The pagans, the druids, the Wiccans, the witches, you know, all of the fun people. But it's really about that connection, and it's, like I said, it's a mutually beneficial connection for them, because the Lovers is a mutually beneficial connection in most cases. The way this reading flowed, it's really about that reconnection being positive. So if you are around and you see Sprites or Fairies, or Pixies, not Fairies, just like I said, say hello, say what happens. You never know. You might end up with a new spiritual friend on the other side of the veil. And they do come across, so don't be too alarmed if you do see one, if you're in the right mindset for it. Because that's just, why is my phone ringing? Oh, because that's kind of how they work. So, with that, we'll just end this with little YouTube-y things. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like on it. If you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and leave any comments. As long as they're respectful, that's all I ask for. Any criticisms or anything else like that, as long as it's respectful, I'm willing to take it constructive criticism. So, Again, you can check the links below in the description to see if there's anything there that might help you connect to the fairies or, reach out to them in some way, shape, or form. And with that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your evening, and I will talk to you later.